Unidentified flying objects. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Edward Ruppelt. As soon as he had landed and parked, the F-86 pilot went into operations to tell his story to his squadron commander. The mere fact that he had fired his guns was enough to require a detailed report as a matter of routine. But the circumstances under which the guns actually were fired created a major disturbance at the fighter base that day. After the squadron commander had heard his pilot's story, he called the group commander, the colonel, and the intelligence officer. They heard the pilot's story. For some obscure reason, there was a personality clash, the intelligence officer's term, between the pilot and the squadron commander. This was obvious, according to the report I was reading, because the squadron commander immediately began to tear the story apart and accuse the pilot of cracking up, or of just shooting his guns for the hell of it and using the wild story as a cover-up. Other pilots in the squadron, friends of the accused pilot, including the intelligence officer and a flight surgeon, were called in to testify. All of these men were aware of the fact that in certain instances a pilot can flip for no good reason, but none of them said that he had noticed any symptoms of mental crack-up in the unhappy pilot. None except the squadron commander. He kept pounding home his idea that the pilot was psycho, and used a few examples of what the report called minor incidents to justify his stand. Finally, the pilot who had been flying with the accused man was called in. He said that he had been monitoring the tactical radio channel, but that he hadn't heard any calls from his buddy's low-flying F-86. The squadron commander triumphantly jumped on this point, but the accused pilot tended to refute it by admitting he was so jumpy that he might not have been on the right channel. But when he was asked if he had checked or changed channels after he had lost the object and before he had finally contacted the other F-86, he couldn't remember. So ended the pilot's story and his interrogation. The intelligence officer wrote up his report of a UFO sighting, but at the last minute, just before sending it, he was told to hold it back. He was a little unhappy about this turn of events, so he went in to see why the group commander had decided to delay sending the report to Project Blue Book. They talked over the possible reactions to the report. If it went out, it would cause a lot of excitement, maybe unnecessarily. Yet, if the pilot actually had seen what he claimed, it was vitally important to get the report in to ATIC immediately. The group commander said that he would make his decision after a talk with his executive officer. They decided not to send the report and ordered it destroyed. When I finished reading, the intelligence officer's first comment was, "What do you think?" Since the evaluation of the report seemed to hinge upon conflicts between personalities I didn't know, I could venture no opinion, except that the incident made up the most fascinating UFO report I'd ever seen. So I batted the intelligence officer's question back to him. "I know the people involved," he replied, "and I don't think the pilot was nuts. I can't give you the report because Colonel X told me to destroy it, but I did think you should know about it." Later, he burned the report. The problems involved in this report are typical. There are certain definite facts that can be gleaned from it. The pilot did see something, and he did shoot at something. But no matter how thoroughly you investigate the incident, that something can never be positively identified. It might have been a hallucination, or it might have been some vehicle from outer space. No one will ever know. It was a UFO. The UFO story started soon after June 24, 1947, when newspapers all over the United States carried the first flying saucer report. The story told how 9 very bright, disc-shaped objects were seen by Kenneth Arnold, a Boise, Idaho businessman, while he was flying his private plane near Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. With journalistic license, reporters converted Arnold's description of the individual motion of each of the objects, like a saucer skipping across water, into flying saucer, a name for the objects themselves. In the 8 years that have passed since Arnold's memorable sighting, the term has become so common that it is now in Webster's dictionary and is known today in most languages in the world. For a while after the Arnold sighting, the term flying saucer was used to describe all disc-shaped objects that were seen flashing through the sky at fantastic speeds. Before long, reports were made of objects other than discs, and these were also called flying saucers. Today, the words are popularly applied to anything seen in the sky that cannot be identified as a common everyday object. Thus, a flying saucer can be a formation of lights, a single light, a sphere, or any other shape, and it can be any color. Performance-wise, flying saucers can hover, go fast or slow, go high or low, turn 90-degree corners, or disappear almost instantaneously. Obviously, the term flying saucer is misleading when applied to objects of every conceivable shape and performance. For this reason, the military prefers the more general, if less colorful name, unidentified flying objects. UFO, pronounced UFO for short. Officially, the military uses the term flying saucer on only 2 occasions. First, in an explanatory sense, as when briefing people who are unacquainted with the term UFO. UFO, you know, flying saucers. And second, in a derogatory sense, for purposes of ridicule, as when it is observed, "He says he saw a flying saucer." This second form of usage is the exclusive property of those persons who positively know that all UFOs are nonsense. Fortunately, for the sake of good manners, if for no other reason, the ranks of this knowing category are constantly dwindling. One by one, these people drop out, starting with the instant they see their first UFO. Some weeks after the first UFO was seen on June 24, 1947, the Air Force established a project to investigate and analyze all UFO reports. The attitude toward this task varied from a state of near panic, early in the life of the project, to that of complete contempt for anyone who even mentioned the words flying saucer. This contemptuous attitude toward flying saucer nuts prevailed from mid-1949 to mid-1950. During that interval, many of the people who were, or had been, associated with the project believed that the public was suffering from war nerves. Early in 1950, the project, for all practical purposes, was closed out. At least it rated only minimum effort. Those in power now reasoned that if you didn't mention the words flying saucers, the people would forget them and the saucers would go away. But this reasoning was false, for instead of vanishing, the UFO reports got better and better. Airline pilots, military pilots, generals, scientists, and dozens of other people were reporting UFOs, and in greater detail than in reports of the past. Radars, which were being built for air defense, began to pick up some very unusual targets, thus lending technical corroboration to the unsubstantiated claims of human observers. As a result of the continuing accumulation of more impressive UFO reports, official interest stirred. Early in 1951, verbal orders came down from Major General Charles P. Cabell, then Director of Intelligence for Headquarters, U.S. Air Force, to make a study reviewing the UFO situation for Air Force Headquarters. I had been back in the Air Force about 6 months when this happened. During the Second World War, I had been a B-29 bombardier and radar operator. I went to India, China, and later to the Pacific, with the original B-29 wing.